Hello, I'm Daniel Shore. In the annals of Watergate, a crucial time for President Nixon were the weeks after his second inaugural in January 1973. During that time, he could probably have saved his presidency by making a clean breast of political espionage and apologizing for it. He chose instead to go the route of cover-up, hush money, and designated scapegoats. The inauguration celebrated the re-election triumph of Richard Nixon. In the VIP enclosure, the White House Chief of Staff, Bob Haldeman, shot a whole movie of his colleagues celebrating. But behind the victory smiles, the president was entangled in a criminal conspiracy. The chairman of his campaign committee, John Mitchell, had sent a team to break into the Watergate to bug the Democrats' headquarters. When they were caught red-handed, Nixon had launched a cover-up of their links to him.
We had pretty much maintained our silence through the pre-electoral period, understanding, of course, that if Mr. Nixon were defeated, we'd be going down the tube, too.
Nixon's presidency was now held hostage to the continued silence of Howard Hunt and the other Watergate defendants. After the election, a call from Hunt came through to one of Nixon's closest advisors, Charles Colson. He knew it could only mean trouble.
I taped it in order to protect myself.
How are we doing? Well, about as well as could be expected. How are you? Just about the same.
In fact, I was setting my own, preparing my own noose, because the things he said in that tape were furthering the cover-up.
We're protecting the guys who were really responsible. But now that that's, and of course that's a continuing requirement, but at the same time, this is a two-way street. Mm-hmm.
I told him that loyalty is a two-way street. We'd been loyal to them, they hadn't been loyal to us.
We think that there's a time when some moves should be made, and certainly the cheapest commodity available is money. These lawyers have not been paid.
I was trying to shut him up. He was talking about money, and I knew what was going on. I mean, in my heart of heart, I knew this guy was blackmailing us.
The inaugural behind him, the president was at the Western White House in San Clemente. There he received some alarming news.
The Senate tonight voted 77-0 to establish a select committee to investigate the Watergate bugging case. The committee will be headed by North Carolina Democrat Sam Ervin.
Nixon feared the cover-up could not withstand a Senate investigation. If he didn't act quickly, the Watergate conspirators would be put under oath and grilled before the television cameras.
He put some pressure on both Ehrlichman and me as to, what are you doing to get this thought through, game planned, or whatever you want to call it.
Haldeman and Ehrlichman shut themselves off in a luxury resort with the man who was organizing the cover-up, the president's lawyer, John Dean.
On the second day, we really got down to the bottom line, and that was, and this is the premise of an entire session we'd had, was that all those who had been arrested were going to remain silent. And Ehrlichman finally asked me this question, and I said, there's no way, I don't know if they're going to remain silent.
I mean, they were caught red-handed. The question was whether the White House was involved. And it seemed to me that the line had to be drawn between those defendants and the White House.
And the answer was they were going to have to be paid off.
Envelopes stuffed with cash had been sent to Howard Hunt and his men to keep them quiet during the trial. Now, on the eve of sentencing, Hunt asked for a lot more money.
The problem was that these amounts were insufficient, way, way, way under what the requirements were.
Hunt threatened to expose a different break-in, one that could be traced straight back to John Ehrlichman at the White House. This break-in was directed at Daniel Ellsberg, who'd been put on trial for leaking Vietnam secrets. An operation to search for dirt on Ellsberg had been approved by Ehrlichman. Hunt reckoned that the White House would pay a lot to keep him quiet.
All of us were headed for prison, and that something ought to be done, should be done. And if they didn't, then dire consequences for the administration could result. Just a plain statement of fact, not a threat.
Hunt's message got through to the White House. John Dean realized the cover-up was getting out of hand. He steeled himself for a difficult conversation with the president. Unknown to Dean, their meeting, like all those in the Oval Office, was recorded on Nixon's hidden taping system.
After some idle chit-chat and chatter back and forth, I said something to him that I hoped would get his full attention.
We have a cancer within, close to the presidency, that's growing. It's growing daily. It's compounding. It grows geometrically now. And there's no assurance that won't bust.
And then I began to tell him what that cancer was. And it was the cover-up that was literally going to eat his presidency alive.
Now, the blackmail is continuing. Hunt called one of the lawyers from the re-election committee on last Friday to meet with him over the weekend. The guy came in to me to see me. I did a message directly from Hunt to me for the first time. Pardon? Hunt is on bail. Correct. Hunt now is demanding another $72,000 for his own personal expenses, another $50,000 to pay his attorney's fees, $120,000. Wanted by the close of business yesterday.
Let me say, I did consider the payment of $120,000 to Hunt's lawyer and to Hunt for his attorney's fees and for support. I considered it not because Hunt was going to blow, using our gangster language here, on Watergate, but because, as the record clearly shows, Dean says, it isn't about Watergate, but it's going to talk about some of the things he's done for Ehrlichman.
Hunt now has made a direct threat against Ehrlichman as a result of this. This is his blackmail. He says, I will bring John Ehrlichman down to his knees and put him in jail. I have done enough seamy things for he and Krogh that they'll never survive it. Ellsberg, and apparently some other things.
Dean tried to convince the president that Hunt's blackmail threatened everyone in the inner circle, especially Nixon's close friend John Mitchell, who had authorized the Watergate break-in.
I wanted to paint the worst conceivable picture based on all the facts I could draw together as quickly as I could draw them together on what was going on, so he would say, we've got to stop this immediately.
Plus, there's a real problem in raising money. Mitchell has been working on raising some money, feeling he's one of the ones the most to lose. But there's no denying the fact that the White House and Ehrlichman, Hallam, and Dean are involved in some of the early money decisions.
And I pulled out of what I thought was thin air an astronomical number.
I would say these people are going to cost $1 million over the next few years.
You, on the money, if you need the money, I mean, you can get the money.
Well, I think that's where
you can get $1 million. If you can get it in cash, I know where it can be done. I mean, it's not easy, but it can be done.
The president said, you better damn well get that done, but fast.
Within the hour, his chief of staff, Bob Haldeman, phoned John Mitchell in New York. Mitchell, now a Wall Street lawyer, would have to raise the money for Hunt's payoff.
Mitchell came down to Washington, and we all met in Bob Haldeman's office. Haldeman had 4 chairs in front of his fireplace. At the very outset of the conversation, Ehrlichman floated just out in the air with the question, has Mr. Hunt's problem been taken care of? And John Mitchell turned to me and said, I don't think that's a problem anymore.
One more envelope stuffed with cash had been sent to Howard Hunt.
Mr. Hunt, was there anyone higher up involved in the conspiracy?
I would testify as follows, gentlemen, that to my personal knowledge, there was not.
Hunt was not the only danger. There was also the man who planted the bugs in the Watergate, the security chief of Nixon's re-election campaign, James McCord.
I had told my family that I'd made a mistake in participating in the first place, and I felt the only way to set it straight was to ask my Lord's forgiveness and to tell the truth at the propitious time. Now, my family kept asking me at various times during the next 6 or 8 months, well, is this a propitious time?
That time came, he decided, the day the Watergate defendants were to be sentenced. McCord wrote to the judge, John Sirica. His letter was the first crack in the cover-up.
He picked up this letter and just sort of held it in front of him, and he began to very slowly read. Item 1, there was political pressure applied to the defendants to plead guilty and to remain silent.
The letter went on to say that perjury had occurred during the trial. Then came his most ominous allegation. There were others involved in the Watergate operation who had not been identified.
And then he said, well, court's adjourned. And then he just sat back to see what the effect was on everybody of what he had been reading, and it was absolute pandemonium.
Hey, get down.
But McCord had not revealed the names of the others he said were involved. The judge indicated that if McCord wanted to get his sentence reduced, he'd have to talk to the Senate Watergate Committee.
Hear from these men. What Judge Sirica has done has made it much more, given us a greater opportunity to get some of the information that might not have been made available by people who, I believe, really have the information.
The Senate hearings were not due to start for another 2 months. Until then, the committee's counsel was determined to keep whatever McCord might tell him from the press. His main concern was the Washington Post, where 2 reporters, Bob Woodward and Carl Bernstein, had kept Watergate in the headlines, exasperating the White House.
I don't respect the type of journalism, the shabby journalism that is being practiced by the Washington Post.
There was a reporter on a rival newspaper who had an in with McCord. Bob Jackson had known him for years. He got a scoop that shook the White House. What McCord had secretly given the committee was names. This was bad news for John Dean.
This surfaced my ubiquitous participation in the Watergate cover-up. It was inevitable. As soon as they started down any road, they were going to find me there because I'd been everywhere. So the press was just surrounding my house, and it looked like they were going to camp out indefinitely. And the president called, and he said, well, John, why don't you go to Camp David and get away from it all?
Dean readily accepted the chance to escape to the rustic presidential retreat. But Nixon's hospitality had a sting in its tail.
I said that John Dean should make a report. And I said, we have to have a statement.
Dean knew the president needed a scapegoat before the Senate hearing started, and he began to fear he was it.
If I put all that I had done in a report, the president, one, could say, well, this is all I ever knew. This is the first time it was ever revealed to me, and use that as a shield, but also use it as a sword against me. So I started walking in the woods up there, and I got to thinking about, what am I going to do when I have to testify? Well, I pulled my oar as hard as anybody in the cover-up. I thought it unfair that I was being asked, in essence, to take the fall, and it angered me.
Tonight, study the behavior of the baboon on the nature of things. Then meet the orangutan of the rainforest on the natural world. And convicts discuss life behind bars on Discovery Sunday, tonight on the Discovery Channel.
Think that focus on the customer as the most important person is absolutely essential.
You don't buy what you want, you buy what the customer wants. That's important.
These are long-term relationships, they are friendships, and you've got to give time to these people.
I guess the most important thing you have to teach a lot of people is about people, be it your fellow worker or your customer.
You're only as good as your last happy customer walking out of the store. Seeing a sign on a store window saying they welcome American Express certainly makes you feel comfortable about going in and not worrying whether you have the money in your wallet.
I call it security because everything works with a card.
There is no option, there's no debate.
I've really been very appreciative of not just the card itself, but the service behind the card.
We expect that kind of service from American Express.
American Express is welcomed wherever they appreciate customers. That's a lot of places.
I want to tell you about my home far away. My mother and father are there.
Strengthening the links of communications requires capital. In the last 3 years, Merrill Lynch raised over $50 billion for communications companies around the globe. We connect investors to opportunities and the people of the world to each other. For them, it makes a difference. The difference is Merrill Lynch.
Hi, I'm Erica Seelinger with MCI. You know, 12 years ago, the cost of an average long-distance call was over $5. Today, that call is only $2.70. Now, what could have caused those rates to drop?
MCI. We helped open telecommunications to free enterprise and helped America save billions of dollars.
And now we're introducing our greatest savings program ever.
Join and save 40% to every MCI customer you choose.
Give us a call and start saving 40% today.
Thursdays, nuts and bolts, tools of the trade, the everyday and the extraordinary. Movie magic, followed by The Secret Life of Machines. Thursday at 10 Mountain, 9 Central on the Discovery Channel.
Have a puppy or adult dog you love dearly, but he wets the carpet, jumps all over you, or chews up your shoes? Is it hard to even take him for a walk? These are just a few of the behavior problems we solve with love at the Academy of Canine Obedience. In our classes and private lessons, we train puppies as young as 12 weeks and adult dogs of any age. You'll have a well-behaved best friend in just a few weeks. Even the kids can learn to control the dog. Our training is fun for your dog and affordable for you. Call Academy of Canine Obedience, 1-800-574-OUR-DOG. We love your dog.
Once you've seen it all, come to the theme park where you can do it all. Come to Six Flags Magic Mountain for the rides. Thrilling rides like the all-new Batman the Ride. Rides the whole family can enjoy, and even rides for little ones in Bugs Bunny World. Enjoy great shows like the Batman Stunt Show and the all-new Police Academy live action show, all in 10 different themed lands. So come today to California's biggest theme park, Six Flags Magic Mountain, for the ride of your life.
Save up to $10 on Six Flags single admission with any can of Coca-Cola product.
By the time John Dean returned to town, he had made up his mind. He would not be the president's scapegoat. But Dean was not the only one to be named by McCord. John Mitchell's deputy, Jeb Magruder, had lied under oath to protect the cover-up. He asked for a meeting to see if he could still rely on his fellow conspirators.
Well, Mitchell's line was that he was going to stick by his story. The line that Dean took was that he was going to tell the truth, whatever that was.
And I listened to Jeb as he was trying to sell me on buying into his story, and I said, Jeb, well, I might have said that, but I didn't say I was going to testify that way. That's a big difference.
The difference, of course, now was that I was the one who had committed perjury, whereas Dean hadn't committed perjury, so I was stuck.
In fact, so was Dean. To avoid perjury when he testified, he would have to confess to his own crimes. And as soon as he could, he sought the advice of a top criminal lawyer.
So I told Dean that the thing I was going to try to do was get him immunity. And that is, he could cooperate, but he wouldn't pay the price of a criminal conviction and sentence. And that appealed to Dean.
To get immunity, they'd have to excite the prosecutors with the evidence that Dean could offer. Schaffer paid a visit to federal prosecutor Seymour Glanzer.
I said to Glanzer that his approach was all out of whack, that he was focusing on a second-rate burglary, that he didn't really have a clue as to what happened in the post-burglary events, that my client had all the clues.
And in return for that, he wants immunity, and he deserves it.
He was going to be the key Watergate witness in their prosecution of some pretty big people.
Dean wouldn't talk about the biggest, the president, because he still worked for him. But to get immunity from prosecution, Dean would have to implicate Nixon's most powerful associates.
I was in San Clemente with the president and about to get on the plane to fly back to Washington when I had a phone call from John Dean, who, it turned out, was calling to tell me that he had now made plans to go to the prosecutors. I was sort of surprised by this because it was out of the blue, and so I said, well, just remember, once the toothpaste is out of the tube, there's not much you can do about it.
Well, the toothpaste went out that afternoon.
The presidential party flew back to Washington as Dean began to tell the prosecutors how the White House had obstructed justice. Nixon and Haldeman didn't know exactly what Dean was revealing, but they feared he might sink the cover-up and the administration with it.
We were going through all kinds of things about how do you get this back on the track where it belongs. I mean, containment had fallen apart.
Back in the Oval Office, Nixon held a crisis meeting. A new scapegoat had to be found. Campaign chairman John Mitchell seemed the logical choice, but he was the president's closest political friend. To persuade Mitchell to fall on his sword, Ehrlichman rehearsed the line someone would have to put to him.
The president strongly feels that the only way that this thing can end up being even a little net plus for the administration is for you to go in and voluntarily make a statement. I am both morally and legally responsible.
And then there was a great choosing up of sides as to who was going to do that. And Nixon kept saying, well, it should be somebody who's very familiar with the facts. Well, I didn't get it at first, but what he was doing was pointing at me.
John.
So Haldeman called him, and Mitchell arrived at my office. And I said, all trails lead back to you, and the president and I feel strongly that you've got to come forward and protect him. And Mitchell puffed on his pipe and looked at me like I was out of my mind.
There's no question about it. The White House doesn't, as I understand it, have anything to come clean about.
John Mitchell's wife, Martha, was less discreet.
My husband has done everything to protect Mr. President. They have all let him down. They have all gotten away from the good people.
You mean let Mr. Nixon down or let Mr. Mitchell down?
Mr. Mitchell has become the fall guy.
That afternoon, Mitchell's former deputy killed off the idea of a single scapegoat. Jeb Magruder went to the prosecutors and corroborated John Dean's story.
They realized that it wasn't just Jeb and John Dean and Gordon Liddy, it was John Mitchell, it was Bob Haldeman, it was, half the people in the White House and at the committee to re-elect, and maybe even the President of the United States.
We had got to the point where we were just sitting on a keg of dynamite, and we concluded that we had no choice other than to tell Henry Peterson.
Peterson, the man in charge of the Justice Department's prosecutors, briefed the president the next day.
I remember Henry Peterson coming in on that Sunday afternoon. He gave me a piece of paper indicating that they had knowledge of Haldeman's participation and they had knowledge of Ehrlichman's participation.
My position was that I can't guarantee you that we have a criminal case at this point, but I can guarantee you that these people are going to be a massive source of embarrassment to the presidency.
And he said, Mr. President, these men have got to resign. You've got to fire them. And I said to him, but Henry, I can't fire men simply on the basis of charges.
This presentation of Watergate is sponsored in part by American Airlines.
So, does it ever get any easier?
I don't think it's supposed to. It's a highly sophisticated flight simulator. But around here, we call it the box. Before you get in, you check your ego at the door. Because even though it doesn't actually fly, It's sure going to test how well you can.
Engine 3, fire.
We just lost number 3. At American, we come here twice a year to get checked out.
Another area where we can regain capability.
Challenge our reflexes. Test our reaction time. Get pushed to the limit.
I'm going to set you up for a wind shear demonstration.
I don't know of another airline that puts more emphasis on training.
30, 20, 10.
See you in 6 months.
Oh, I'll be back. But if you're one of those people sitting behind me, I'll bet you'll agree. It's worth it. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to welcome you aboard American Airlines. Our flight this morning to the East Coast should be a smooth one. We'll be flying at an altitude of 33,000 feet.
Hi, I'm Erica Seelinger with MCI. You know, 12 years ago, the cost of an average long-distance call was over $5. Today, that call is only $2.70. Now, what could have caused those rates to drop?
MCI. We helped open telecommunications to free enterprise and helped America save billions of dollars.
And now we're introducing our greatest savings program ever.
Join and save 40% to every MCI customer you choose.
Give us a call and start saving 40% today.
Do you know?
Yeah.
That what most people don't know about AIDS could fill a video? Time Out. The truth about HIV, AIDS, and you. It's filled with facts and fun. Rent one free at participating video stores.
Welcome to a journey into the future. Let us explore together the future. A future not of dreams, but of reality. Japan Dreaming. Monday at 10 Mountain, 9 Pacific on Discovery Showcase.
But for man, no rest and no ending. He must go on.
At the Discovery Channel, we go to extraordinary lengths to tell extraordinary stories. Stories that take you off the beaten path. So if we see it, you see it. The Discovery Channel. Explore your world.
Nixon went sailing on a presidential yacht to consider how to break the news to Haldeman and Ehrlichman. He knew they wouldn't go without a struggle.
My feeling was that there were no grounds for kicking me out.
We really devoted 100% of our time to Watergate. What should we do? Should we resign? Should we take leaves of absence? Somewhere along the line in there, Easter Sunday came along, and the president went to Key Biscayne. First time I hadn't gone with him to Key Biscayne for Easter. It became more and more evident that the chances of our being cleared were getting slimmer and slimmer.
Their fate was sealed when the secret Nixon would have paid $1 million to protect came out. John Dean's lawyer led the prosecutors to the evidence.
Charlie Schaffer said, oh, by the way, there's something further that you might be interested in knowing that my client can tell you. And then he turned to Mr. Dean and said, tell him, John.
I explained to them that they had in their files information that was evidence of a break-in and a burglary of Daniel Ellsberg's psychiatrist's office.
We had this picture. It showed parking spaces with the names of people on the parking space. It didn't make any sense to us. And we said, what in the world is that all about?
They were photocopies of snapshots that Howard Hunt had taken at the psychiatrist's office. The CIA, which had developed them for Hunt, had passed them on to the prosecutors with no explanation. Dean revealed what they were, evidence that Watergate was just one in a series of White House crimes.
Earl Silp immediately recognized the significance, and his mandible or jaw just dropped open. And he got right quiet.
The next morning, Henry Peterson received a memo from Silbert. He went to the president with the news that 2 White House employees had burglarized a doctor's office.
And the president said, when I told him, I know about that. That's a national security matter. You stay out of that.
Peterson did put the evidence of the Ellsberg break-in before the judge who made it public. Now, Ehrlichman, who had authorized the Ellsberg operation, faced prosecution. The president could hesitate no longer.
I got a call from the president from Camp David, and the White House operator got me on the phone, and there was a long, long delay before finally the president came on in a very muffled, downbeat voice and said, I was wondering if you could get up here at 1:30 today.
Bob Haldeman called me and said, the president wants to see us. I said, what's up? He says he's decided to fire us.
It would take all Nixon's political skills to persuade the 2 men who knew his guilty secrets to sacrifice themselves to save him.
Haldeman came in first. He's standing as he usually does. Not a dramatic Nazi stormtrooper, but just a decent, respected, crew-cut guy. That's the way Haldeman was.
Even while he was being fired, the chief of staff took notes.
The president said, let's go out and look at the tulips. I may not be alive much longer, so I've got to enjoy beauty while I can.
Nixon let Haldeman know that he even intended to resign himself.
I said, you can't resign. You've got to stay as president. And he said, well, Ehrlichman thinks that I should. He was really concerned because he thinks that Ehrlichman wants him to admit that he ordered illegal acts.
Seeing his president so overwrought, the chief of staff loyally agreed to go.
Ehrlichman then came in, and I took Ehrlichman out on the porch at Aspen.
And we stood there. We didn't sit down. He said, I guess Bob's told you why I wanted you to come. I said, yes.
I could just hardly bring myself to tell Ehrlichman that he had to go because I knew he was going to resist it. I said, you know, John, when I went to bed last night, he said, I hoped, I almost prayed I wouldn't wake up this morning.
Then he began to sob. And I put my arm around his shoulder. At that point, I was feeling more sorry for him than I was for myself. He was evidencing great distress. And he turned and walked out of the room.
After Ehrlichman left, the president had me come back and to review his meeting with Ehrlichman.
Although the Ehrlichman meeting had gone well, Nixon was concerned that he wouldn't go quietly. He feared that Ehrlichman still wanted the president to admit he had ordered the illegal acts. The next night, the president went on television to announce he had cleaned up his administration.
Today, in one of the most difficult decisions of my presidency, I accepted the resignations of 2 of my closest associates in the White House, Bob Haldeman, John Ehrlichman, 2 of the finest public servants it has been my privilege to know. The counsel to the president, John Dean, has also resigned.
Now that Dean was out, he needed immunity more than ever. His lawyer told him it was time to tell the whole story, sparing no one.
I said, so what about the president? And, we can't talk about the P. I says, the P? I says, what are you talking about the P? He says, it's the national security, it's attorney-client privilege, it's this, that's the other thing. I says, if the 2 of you in the pod committing the crime together, I says that there's no privilege that protects one co-conspirator from another co-conspirator.
Dean finally agreed to tell the prosecutors about his conversations with the president, including the one in which Nixon had said he could get $1 million to pay off the burglars.
It was clear that what he was saying was that the president knew all about what was going on and had been advised and was reported to and was informed of things.
The prosecutors disagreed on whether Dean's new evidence justified immunity. Seymour Glanzer was convinced it was worth giving him a deal in order to prosecute the men above him.
That was a very persuasive argument, and Seymour is very persuasive. I just felt differently.
Silbert felt that if the president's counsel broke the law, he must not go unpunished, and he had the final say.
We told him, Silbert told him unequivocally that there was not going to be immunity for Dean.
I said no deal, and I told Glanzer, I said, Glanzer, you haven't got the only show in town.
The other show in town that could grant Dean immunity was the Senate Watergate Committee. Chairman Sam Ervin and his fellow Democrats were delighted to have Dean as their star witness, but the vice chairman was out to shield the White House from his own committee's investigation.
And it was absolutely natural for the ranking Republican, the senior Republican, to go down to the White House and say, look, I'm your friend, and I'm going to try to keep these heathen devils from biting your ankle.
Baker's loyalties were put to the test even before the public hearings began. At a closed session, the Democrats proposed granting immunity to Dean. Senator Baker bristled.
I especially resented that he really showed no trace of remorse about his lack of fidelity to his former boss.
Baker then said, why should we give immunity to the worst criminal in Watergate? He's the one that ought to be indicted. He's the one that should be imprisoned, John Dean.
But Baker convinced only one other Republican, Senator Gurney, to vote with him. It was time for Baker to steer a center course.
Senator Baker then said to Gurney, well, you know, we do want the public to respect this committee, and it won't look good that if we seem like we're not all together. So I'm willing to change my vote.
The committee voted unanimously to request Judge Sirico to enter orders allowing the committee to give immunity to John W. Dean III.
Dean had struck an excellent deal. He would write a statement describing everything he had done in the cover-up, but the Republicans would be prevented from seeing it in advance.
The deal with Dash was that Dean was to come right out of my office and appear on public session, on television, in the Senate.
John Dean now set out on a course that would destroy the President of the United States.
Subcommittee will come to order.
Dean's appearance was carefully staged. Horn-rimmed glasses instead of his usual contact lenses, and a new short haircut. Dean's testimony described all his meetings with the president in chilling detail.
The meeting with the president that afternoon with Haldeman, Ehrlichman, and myself was a tremendous disappointment to me because it was quite clear that the cover-up, as far as the White House was concerned, was going to continue.
Republicans were absolutely helpless to do anything with Dean's testimony.
Accordingly,
keeping the Republicans away from Dean before he testified paid off. Baker had to digest 245 pages of complex testimony as Dean delivered it.
I said, this is like trying to shovel smoke. You know, there's so many facts, and they go in so many different directions. I don't have the foggiest idea, really, what our objective is. What are we after? I want to try to focus this inquiry.
I'm trying to focus on the president. What did the president know, and when did he know it?
Baker's question was subtlety itself. He sounded as though he was being tough on the president, but he was actually being tough on Dean.
Can you tell us whether or not you can shed any further light on whether the president knew of the break-in of the Watergate complex on June 17th?
You mean, did he have prior knowledge of it?
Yes.
I cannot testify of any first-hand knowledge of that.
But Dean's knowledge of the president's role in the cover-up was first-hand.
He asked me how much it was going to cost. I gave him my best estimate, which I said was $1 million or more. He, in turn, said to me that, well, $1 million is certainly no problem to raise.
The Republicans had run out of ideas.
Before you do, let me reiterate
The focus of my inquiry is on what did the president know.
And there are two questions to which we must address ourselves here. What did the president know, and when did he stop knowing it?
Several high-ranking members of the Democratic Party are attempting to seize control of the government of the United States by legitimate means.
A new danger to the presidency was public ridicule, as television, sitcoms, and soaps were replaced by the Senate hearings.
Since you were the Attorney General of the United States, why didn't you throw Mr. Liddy out of your office?
Well, I think Mr. Dash, in hindsight, I not only should have thrown him out of the office, I should have thrown him out of the window.
Well, since you did neither,
And that relates to some of the subject matter that I'm, at this point, not able to talk to the committee about.
The foreign intelligence activities had nothing to do with the opinion of Ellsberg's psychiatrist about his intellectual or emotional or psychological state.
How do you know that, Mr. Chairman?
Because I can understand the English language. It's my mother tongue.
We're Haldeman, Ehrlichman, Mitchell, and Dean. Our job was to see that the White House stayed green. We might have had flaws like bending the laws, but God only knows it was for a good cause. But so it won't come as a terrible blow. There's one little thing that we think you should know. Whatever we say isn't quite what we mean. Haldeman, Ehrlichman, Mitchell, and Dean.
Nixon's men weighed in to defend him. At first, Haldeman seemed to confirm Dean's most damaging testimony.
And Dean said probably $1 million. But the problem is that it is hard to raise. The president said there is no problem in raising $1 million.
But he added a sentence that reversed the meaning.
We can do that, but it would be wrong.
It began as a third-rate burglary.
While we would pull what is called a black bag job, a surreptitious entry.
It would end with the downfall of a presidency.
And then you destroy yourself.
Watergate. This in-depth home video set contains rare interviews, recently uncovered documents, and lets you hear the player's story in their own words. To order this fascinating 5-hour video for $49.95, call 1-800-652-2400.
This presentation of Watergate is sponsored in part by Merrill Lynch.
A new chapter has begun in Merrill Lynch's history in Asia. We are the first American securities firm invited to open an office in mainland China. Being there gives our financial consultants a different perspective, which makes a difference for our clients. The difference is Merrill Lynch.
Hi, I'm Jed Longhurst with MCI, and because I joined Friends and Family too, I can show you how easily it works for me. I save 20% on calls to anyone I choose, no matter which long-distance company they're with. For example, Jack, my brother-in-law, he's still with AT&T. But watch closely because Jack may switch to MCI's Friends and Family too. He'll do it if he's smart, which he's not. But if he does, I'll save 40% when I call him, and even though he doesn't deserve it, he'll save 40% when he calls me.
The future. Where people may not be compatible, but your Macintosh will be. Power Macintosh is here, and the future is better than you expected. Now, see the world's most powerful business software, accelerated for Power Macintosh.
It's already known for surviving virtually every form of driving torture known to man, except one.
Are we there yet?
He's touching me. I want to go home.
Introducing Discovery, the family vehicle from Land Rover.
I have to go again.
Tonight, find out what it's really like to be behind bars.
This is not Scared Straight. This is what you'll have to deal with for the rest of your life.
Choice is yours.
Choices. Then relive one day, one typical 24-hour period in our country, where 61 people will be shot. A day in the death of America. Tonight, beginning at 10 Mountain, 9 Pacific, on Discovery Sunday.
It's the big day. You're gonna buy a new car. Sunroof. You found what you want. You got a good price. And just when you feel the wind in your hair, the sun in your face, the dealer turns down your credit. At Theodore Robbins Ford Isuzu, we have dozens of finance sources, and we'll go the extra mile to get your credit through. There are car dealers. And there's Theodore Robbins Ford Isuzu, your good friend dealer in Costa Mesa.
You already know you're supposed to take care of your teeth. And you know what happens if you don't. We know you've been meaning to call a dentist. You're gonna call soon, really. There's so much stuff you need to do before you call. Feed the dog. Call your mother. And you need to research the dentist. Or you can do the smart thing. Let 1-800-DENTIST do the research for you. Come on, call 1-800-DENTIST today.
I had no prior knowledge of the Watergate break-in. I neither took part in nor knew about any of the subsequent cover-up activities. My statement has been challenged by only one of the 35 witnesses who appeared.
Dean was saying one thing, the White House was saying something contradictory, and Senator Ervin felt like there may never be a way that this was going to be resolved.
But there was a way to resolve it, stemming from a Nixon practice that John Dean had long suspected.
As well. The president almost from the outset began asking me a number of leading questions, which made me think that the conversation was being taped and a record was being made to protect himself.
In fact, all the president's White House meetings were automatically recorded on a secret system that Nixon had installed. One of the few people who knew of its existence was White House aide Alexander Butterfield. When it was his turn to face the committee's investigators, he was not sure he could keep the taping secret without committing perjury.
I had rehearsed this in my mind many, many times. If asked a relatively vague or indirect question, the answer to which would be about the tapes, I could easily fuzz it. I could give a vague answer in response. But if I were asked a direct question, I would give a direct answer, and the tapes would be revealed.
The Democrats' investigator had a document prepared by the president intended to disprove Dean's testimony.
A memo had come over secretly from the White House to the Republicans. It was a detailed account, line by line, quotes of what Dean had said to the president, what the president had said back.
He flipped this little paper my way and said, "Where might this paper have come from?"
And Butterfield picked up the thing and read it and said, "Oh, this is very detailed. This is very detailed." So, well, where could it come from? He said, "Well, let me think about that a minute." And he set it down.
And to my great relief, they moved on to other things.
While Scott Armstrong was asking Butterfield about other matters through the remainder of his interview, I was trying to decide how I wanted to approach this because I knew my time would come.
After 3 hours, the Republican counsel got his turn.
I asked Butterfield if there might be any validity to the suggestion made by John Dean in his testimony that there was a taping system in the White House.
That was a direct question. So I said, I remember saying, I don't know why I said this, I said, "I'm sorry you fellows asked me that question." Well, I was sorry. Yes, there was. And they said, "Could you tell us about it?"
The Democrats' investigator could hardly wait to tell his boss.
And he came up, his face was drenched, his eyes were bulging, and the first words that came out of his mouth is, "The president bugged himself."
But next morning, Saturday, euphoria gave way to doubt.
It could just as likely, if there was a taping system, exonerate the president and prove that John Dean was a liar. I wanted to test Dean's credibility.
The chief counsel met his deputy and they set off to see Dean.
Sam Dash and Jim Hamilton came out to the house. Mo and I were there, but Sam really got right down to business. And what he told me is he said that, John, there's a taping system in the White House. How do you feel about that?
And I can remember that Mo and John, I believe, was sitting on a couch, and I was standing by the fireplace. And I did that on purpose so I could gauge John's reaction. I was watching him very intently, and Sam told him, and I never will forget it, John broke into this huge smile, this beaming smile.
I couldn't have been more elated. I said, Sam, I said, everything I've told you, you're now going to find a record for.
Just as a reminder that a date by itself.
On Monday morning, Butterfield was having his hair cut. Over the weekend, surprisingly, the news had not leaked and the committee had not summoned him. He thought he'd been spared the ordeal of testifying in public after all.
And suddenly there's a phone call, so they bring the phone over to me, and I answered, it's Jim Hamilton.
And I said to him that the committee wanted him to testify that afternoon. And he was quite upset about this.
I was profane, as a matter of fact, and I told Jim Hamilton, nothing against Jim Hamilton, but I just said, I am not going to be there.
So I went back up to the hearing room, and I leaned over to Senator Ervin, and I said, Senator, I have located Mr. Butterfield. He is in the barbershop, but he says he's not going to come.
And I'm watching the TV. All barbershops and beauty salons had the TV on. Suddenly, I see Jim Hamilton behind the chairman, and he turns and sort of looks, and Hamilton whispered in his ear something, and those big bushy eyebrows of his, I saw him go, like in disbelief at what he's hearing from Hamilton. Whoop, whoop, whoop.
He said, you tell Mr. Butterfield that if he is not here early this afternoon, that I'm going to send the Senate Sergeant at Arms to arrest him.
I knew he wasn't really going to have federal marshal pick me up on the street, but that was his way of saying, be here.
At shortly after 1, he arrived at the Senate somewhat contrite, more compliant, and nicely coiffed.
Butterfield, are you aware of the installation of any listening devices in the Oval Office of the President?
I was aware of listening devices. Yes, sir.
Butterfield's revelations came while Nixon was in Bethesda Naval Hospital with pneumonia. His tapes, the evidence that proved his involvement in Watergate, were certain to be subpoenaed. Now he was faced with a crucial decision. Should he destroy them? The president's 2 lawyers, Leonard Garment and Fred Bozart, came to the hospital with his new chief of staff.
The president was in his gown, and we sat down at a table on the other side of the room, across from his bed.
My presentation was centered around the consideration that the destruction of the tapes would be a felony, an obstruction of justice, and could form the first count of a bill of impeachment. And that was something to think about.
On the other hand, Bozart's legal point of view was that until they were subpoenaed, these tapes were the president's property. I happened to share that view. The president became very angry and said to me that he was not going to take either of their advice and would prefer to sleep on it overnight. I told him he didn't have long to make his decision.
As Nixon deliberated, his closest advisors urged him to act.
I had a personal phone call from John Connally saying, Bob, you've got to get to the president. You've got to tell him to pile those tapes up in a large pile out in the Rose Garden, assemble the entire press corps around the edges of the Rose Garden, soak those tapes with gasoline, and light them with a match.
The people that were getting in touch with him were, for the most part, persons who had had very extensive discussions with him and were on tape and had understandable reasons why they would want those tapes to disappear from the face of the earth.
I considered it, but I felt that it would be an indication that I felt that there were conversations on there that demonstrated that I was guilty. I thought it would be an admission of guilt to destroy them.
If I had thought that on those tapes that there was conversation that was criminal, I sure as the dickens would have destroyed them.
3 days after leaving the hospital, the president received a subpoena to hand over the tapes, and Nixon's refusal to surrender them would lead to the fiercest battle of his presidency.
Want to know more about the corruption of American politics and the fall of Richard Nixon? Watergate is also a book by Fred Emery, who covered the scandal as it happened. Ask for Watergate at bookstores now.
Up next, Watergate continues on the Discovery Channel.